Welcome to this video on the top 10 werewolves of the Glasswalkers tribe from the tabletop role-playing game Werewolf the Apocalypse. One may wonder, how can a tribe of werewolves be the Glasswalkers if glass wasn't invented until the Bronze Age? Well, the tribe we know today as Glasswalkers have gone through a number of changes, from the Warders of Men to the Tetrasomians to the Iron Riders, and finally the Glasswalkers. The Walkers are all about using technology and the humans who create it to protect Gaia. While other Garou have a severe streak of Luddism, the Glasswalkers will use tools, techniques, and methodologies, at least those not tainted by the Wyrm, to carry out their mission, which usually ends up being played as Garou with cell phones and machine guns. For the sake of simplicity, this video will not cover Garou who are Iron Riders, Tetrasomians, or Warders of Men. But without further ado, the top 10 werewolves of the Glasswalkers. Number 10. Gianluigi Lucci. The man, or Garou, who is responsible for shaping the American Glasswalker tribe for the first half of the 20th century was Gianluigi Lucci, born in 1895 on the west side of Chicago to two Italian immigrants. Like many young, tough kids who ran the streets of early 20th century Chicago, Gianluigi fell in with his own people against outsiders and joined an Italian street gang that was routinely embroiled in brawls and knife fights with a local Jewish gang. He had his first change at the age of 13 during one of the gang fights and ended up killing both Italian and Jewish kids in the same frenzy. Lucci then formed a pack of his own with three other Italian Glasswalkers, in much the same vein as his gang had once been, and even in the same territory. The Chicago police assumed that this was just the same bunch of young Italian punks and paid them no additional attention. In time, Lucci and his particularly violent pack came to the attention of one John Donato Torrio, aka Johnny the Fox Torrio, the man who built the Chicago outfit and mastermind of the National Crime Syndicate, alongside Charles Lucky Luciano. Torrio was from Lucania in the Old Country, but had made it big in New York as a gangster, running numbers, bookmaking, loan sharking, hijacking, prostitution, and narcotics. In 1919, Torrio left New York for Chicago on the invitation of his aunt, Victoria Moresco, the city's wealthiest madam and owner of over 100 brothels in the city, along with her business partner, Vincenzo Big Jim Colosimo. They were having trouble with extortion from the Black Hand, the Neapolitan Black Hand, not the vampire Black Hand. Torrio needed some local muscle and heard that a bunch of West Side Italians known as the Wise Guys had a reputation for making their enemies disappear. After a few successful jobs for Torrio that broke the Black Hand's back, Torrio then took Lucci under his wing, along with another young, aspiring gangster from Brooklyn who, like Lucci, was the son of Italian immigrants, Alphonse Gabriel Capone. The Wise Guys became some of Torrio's most effective hitmen and protection when the Volstead Act went into effect and prohibition was imposed on America. Lucci came under Capone's sway as he rose to prominence in Torrio's organization. Lucci had been raised with all of the ethnic and religious prejudices the son of Italian peasants could ask for. But Capone was loud, flashy, and he didn't let little things like ethnicity or even religion get in the way of what he wanted. Capone married May Josephine Coughlin, an Irish girl. His closest ally was Jake Guzik, a Polish Jew who acted as the financial and legal mastermind of the Chicago outfit. For Lucci, this was a revelation. It was something he had never thought of, working with whoever was useful, rather than those who were already tied to him by blood or religion. As a theurge, Lucci took a journey into the Umbra and returned 3 weeks later bearing gifts that no one had used in decades, or in certain cases, centuries. Lucci then taught these gifts to fellow Glasswalkers, in consideration for favors to be claimed later. Lucci's pack is responsible for several hits for the Chicago outfit, and within Glasswalker packs is rumored to be responsible for the murder of Northside gang leader and Capone's main rival in bootlegging, Jaime Weiss. Even wilder rumors credit Lucci and the Wise Guys for carrying out the St. Valentine's Day massacre on February 14, 1929, that broke the Northside Gang once and for all, and made Al Capone the king of bootlegged Canadian whiskey. Backed by Capone's Chicago outfit and later the National Crime Syndicate, Lucci led the Wise Guys camp to be the dominant force in the Glasswalkers tribe for nearly half a century. But as strong-willed as Lucci was, between the Wise Guys, his Umbral journeys, fighting the creatures of the Wyrm that dwelt in the heart of Chicago, and tangling with federal law enforcement, this Garou was burning the candle at both ends. In 1960, Lucci's candle finally burned out. No, he did not die, but he fell to Harano. But such was Lucci's strength of will, or perhaps his fear of what waited for him after death, that he clung to life for another 38 years, finally dying in 1998 at the age of 103. Number 9. Antonio Lone Wolf Lupo. Strangely enough, Gianluigi Lucci wasn't the only Glasswalker gangster affiliated with the Torrio Capone crime organization. Roughly in the same time period as Lucci, a Glasswalker emerged from Little Sicily on the north side of Chicago, Lone Wolf Lupo. Most of his early life remains a mystery unsolved. The first mention of Lupo begins when he and his packmates, a bone gnar by the name of Danny Rabies Henderson, and fellow Glasswalker Antonio Radio Wave Serrano, ran their own operation out of Little Sicily. The elder of the ward, Luciano Steam Engine Arrigo, thought it was disrespectful that these young pups were running a business in his territory and not giving him a piece of their action. But Lupo wouldn't back down from the elder wolf, challenged him to a duel, and killed him. That was when Lone Wolf Lupo's name began to draw attention as more Glasswalkers and bone gnars joined his pack. Despite his moniker, Lupo was rarely without his pack, which even included kinfolk as higher-up members. Lupo became incredibly rich thanks to the Volstead Act and an alliance with the Chicago outfit. It is estimated that he made millions in the 1920s thanks to his piece of the bootlegging racket, along with his other, less savory occupation. Antonio Lupo, at various points in his career, acted as a hitman. His big break came when he eliminated Big Jim Colosimo for Johnny Torrio. Later in life, he traded his skills to the Vampire Lords of Chicago. It too paid very well, and none of his targets usually survived. In fact, Lupo was one of the rare Garou who could make a deal with a vampire and come out ahead in the bargain. But Lupo's greatest ambition was to unite the Glasswalkers and Bone Gnars into a single, unbeatable urban tribe, with his own pack as the model. He sent emissaries to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Providence, Baltimore, St. Louis, Cleveland, and any other city, flashing cash and bending werewolves' ears towards the profit to be found from joining together. Lupo very nearly pulled it off before the Great Depression came and ruined everything. As a member of Capone's organization, Lupo was at odds with Dean O'Banion, leader of the North Side Gang. In fact, O'Banion was one of the few gangsters with the nerve to continuously hit the Chicago outfit, and Lupo in particular. O'Banion was a thorn, and wolves don't like thorns in their paws. But there was one thing Lupo didn't count on. O'Banion had a werewolf on his own payroll, an Irish Fianna, fresh off the boat, by the name of Three Fingers Mallory. The two met in person when Lupo and his pack launched a retaliatory raid on one of O'Banion's booze warehouses. Mallory actually managed to get the better of Lupo in battle, but the Irish werewolf was chased off by Rabies Henderson and Robert Crushpaw Vinciano. The next day, Lupo received word that Dean O'Banion was dead, murdered in his own flower shop by three of Capone's men. After O'Banion's death and burial in unconsecrated ground, Mallory reached out to Lupo, though it's unknown if he entered Lupo's service. Lone Wolf Lupo's final fate remains a mystery. The members of Lupo's pack, in defiance of conventional knowledge about how gangsters or werewolves end up, mostly retired from the life as very rich men. The last surviving member of the pack, Rabies Henderson, claimed that Lupo handed over the organization to a successor, took his money, and left town. Number 8. Roger Daly. Roger Daly was born in the 1950s and was the only child of Graham Daly, a successful businessman and leader of Vancouver's glasswalker contingent from the 1940s until the 1960s. His mother was not kinfolk, but she was aware of her husband's true nature, and later her son's, when it became apparent that he had bred true and would inevitably change. She supported her son mentally and emotionally as he underwent the first change and endured his rite of passage during his teenage years. In 1971, Daly, along with a Malkavian vampire named Necros, hammered out a scheme to form a compact between the vampires and werewolves of Vancouver. Prince Siegfried had had a healthy respect for the Garou's strength, and they in turn were wary of the ancient vampire's cunning and power. By the time Daly presented the terms of what would become the Vancouver Compact to Necros, the terms were mutually beneficial. The vampires would utilize their influence to prevent the actual, knowing servants of the Wyrm from gaining power in the city. They would restrain the excesses of the timber and mining companies in British Columbia, as well as fund a reforestation program, and grant the Garou free access to the Great Cairn in Stanley Park at the heart of the city. The Garou, for their part, would cease all attacks on the vampires of Vancouver, monitor the borders of the city for any unusual influxes of vampires, especially anarchs and Sabbat, and report their entry, or attempted entry, to the prince. Daly and Necros agreed to the deal between themselves, but would have to sell it to their respective sides. Daly first made his proposal to the leader of Vancouver's Silverfangs, Montgomery Abercorn, who was also de facto spiritual leader of British Columbia's Garou. In September of 1971, Abercorn raised the proposal at a grand moot. The Shadow Lords opposed it outright because a Silverfang had proposed it, and the Red Talons howled red murder about making peace with the enemy and minions of the Wyrm. The Bone Gnars and Glasswalkers, at Daly's suggestion, held their silence. But the Stargazers, Silent Striders, Children of Gaia, and Black Fury spoke in favor of the plan. 1 month later, the Garou voted in favor of the plan by a whopping 75%. 3 weeks later, Abercorn, accompanied by his advisor, Roger Daly, signed the Vancouver Compact with Prince Siegfried. But Daly's triumph turned to tragedy later in the decade when he lost both of his parents. Graham Daly was killed while fighting a transient vampire, who was later killed on the orders of the prince. Soon after, Roger's mother died as the result of a hit-and-run car accident. These two tragedies made Roger a millionaire in his 20s, and had he chosen to, he could have lived off of his parents' estate and never worked a day in his life. But he was too much his father's son for that. Soon after burying his mother, Roger founded Daly & Associates, a management consulting firm that not only multiplied his wealth several times over, but gained him contacts with the most important business people in Vancouver. By the mid-1980s, Roger Daly was the owner of the Glasswalkers' Cairn in Vancouver, the Smiling Buddha, and leader of the corporate raider Sept. The Smiling Buddha, at the corner of Hastings Street and Main Street, had once been a main spot for Vancouver's punk scene in the late 1980s, but the site was built on a cairn and burial ground of the Tatliyoko Sept long before that. Daly, through some real estate maneuvers and a convenient incident of arson, drove the Smiling Buddha out of business, then purchased it for a song. But the cairn that Daly had worked so hard for, and the peace he had labored to make, would both fall in the 1990s. Roger Daly died defending the Smiling Buddha in 1994 from an attack by Pentek's First Team No. 45, aka the Cleaning Crew. Today, in the Timberwolf Lodge adjoining the multi-million-dollar Diefbacher's Casino, built on a supposedly cleaned-up toxic waste dump and worm cairn, a black wolf pelt with silver hackles and markings that resemble spectacles around the eyes hangs on the wall of the lobby. This is the final insult that Pentek's and their technocratic allies, the Syndicate, paid to the Glasswalker, Roger Daly. Number 7. Kleon Winston. So in one of those happy little lore/editorial snafus, there appear to be two glasswalkers by the name of Kleon Winston, one of whom is the leader of New York's glasswalkers, and the other is an uber-elite, shirtless hacker. And you'll be getting both of them. So first up, Kleon Winston, as he appeared in Rage Across New York. Young leaders are more common in the glasswalkers than in other tribes, given the tribe's collective fascination with the new and the novel. But Kleon was a Hamid in his early 20s and barely a Fostern when he became leader of more than 50 glasswalkers in the Big Apple. Kleon grew up in Harlem and ran with a gang of kinfolk. By the time he underwent the first change and understood his heritage, he was a tough fighter but a fair leader. In fact, his rite of passage was one of the last undertaken by the glasswalker's previous leader, Pride of the Pack, before the old Garou succumbed to Harano and left the city. In the ensuing power struggle, Kleon found himself climbing high and fast through the glasswalker's hierarchy, despite his youth and lack of renown, thanks to the advice from a ragabash, Lupita Consuela Corazon. She made sure that Kleon was always where his opponents least expected him, or wanted him to be. He rallied the disheartened glasswalkers around him, and eventually gained leadership over the tribe. In the 3 years since, Kleon has renewed old alliances with the city's bone gnars, giving him a wealth of information to stay one step ahead of his enemies. He has also picked up many glasswalkers and kinfolk from the gutter, dusted them off, and brought them back into the fold. Kleon's advisor, Lupita, has a deep connection to Gaia, though she is rather capricious and free-spirited for a glasswalker. However, the wilder she is, the more accurate her predictions are, and Kleon makes sure to keep her safe without inhibiting her freedom. During his leadership, Kleon unknowingly caught hold of a money laundering plot by Chester R. Van Gelding, leader of the business caste of the 7th Generation, a cult of the Defiler Wyrm. And now, Kleon Winston, as he appears in Tribe Book Glasswalkers. If Kleon Winston had been born a few decades sooner, he would have likely been a wise guy, instead of a random interrupt. Not that he's a gangster or a goon of any kind, but he is a networker without peer, and using those skills, he could always manage to put the right people together and the right information to reach the right outcomes. His networking skills revealed hard evidence of the existence of the 7th Generation, a Defiler Wyrm cult committed to the abuse and trafficking of children until they became servants of the Wyrm themselves. Winston had names, dates, locations, photographs, and dossiers on their leaders and agents, more than any Garou who even believed that 7th Generation existed in the first place. He had rang the alarm on the 7th Generation for years, but was unable to convince the other tribes of New York that they were a threat. But things changed when Jonas Albrecht won the Silver Crown and became king of the Silverfangs. Loba Carcassonne, a longtime enemy of the 7th Generation and leader of the Heaven Pack, mentioned Winston to Albrecht, who had encountered the 7th Generation during his exile and was eager to see them destroyed. Winston's intelligence was up to date and nearly perfect. The subsequent destruction of the 7th Generation was written into the Silver Record, and Winston was elevated to the rank of Athro for his work. Additionally, he has earned the right to claim a boon from King Albrecht, though he hasn't decided what to ask for yet. For now, Kleon Winston is busy digging into Endron Oil, a subsidiary of Pentex. Unfortunately for him, Endron is also looking into him as well, and experience has taught them that the best way to hunt nosy little wolves is with a high-powered rifle from long distance. Number 6. Gabriel van der Linden. When a visionary is blinded by his dreams, he can seem monstrous to those who do not share it. Gabriel van der Linden, leader of the Cyberdogs camp of the Glasswalkers, was such a visionary who very nearly tore the tribe apart. Gabriel van der Linden was born to a wealthy Belgian couple and was as gifted a child as one might ask for. He was a scholar and an athlete, and might have even been an Olympic sprinter had he not been more interested in his studies. While studying in Paris, van der Linden underwent his first change and killed over 30 people in his frenzy. After he was taken by the Glasswalkers and inducted into the tribe as a Galliard, he continued his education by correspondence whenever possible to avoid another incident like his first change. Gabriel formed a friendship with 3 other cubs, who would go on to form the original Cyberdogs pack with him. Van der Linden recognized that the Wyrm had become a being of destruction through corruption, that it sought to rot away Gaia wherever it could. But what if the Garou, rather than trying to return Gaia to some primordial Pangaian state, could protect Gaia by shielding her with steel and electricity and titanium? Van der Linden's idea seemed validated as computers became smaller, faster, and operated at higher capacity. But van der Linden's dreams grew from there. It seemed to Gabriel that not only would Gaia have to be perfected with technology, but all things, including her protectors, would require similar perfection. Van der Linden and the Cyberdogs' experiments started with animals, but when his efforts to cyberize the unfortunate creatures failed, van der Linden decided that hardier test subjects would be required. The Cyberdogs kidnapped a lupus Garou and implanted it with cybernetics. The experiment was a modest success. The werewolf's body did not reject the implants outright, but they had the minor side effect of driving the lupus completely insane. Van der Linden and the Cyberdogs had several outward successes, but they kept their experiments on lupus Garou, especially the very rare Glasswalker lupus, a secret. But it was not what van der Linden wanted. He craved perfection, timeless, immovable, and unassailable. In 1998, he summoned as many Cyberdogs as were available to Belgium for a quest into the Cyber Realm, one of the 13 near realms of the Umbra, and the one closest to the Weaver. When the Cyberdogs returned, they had been transformed. They were equal parts wolf, man, spirit, and machine. But van der Linden's dreams were destroyed when Elizabeth Genereader of the Random Interrupts camp exposed his experiments on lupus to the entire tribe. The Cyberdogs were prescribed, hunted down, and destroyed. But Gabriel van der Linden escaped the slaughter. Now, van der Linden, a pawn of the Weaver, regards the destruction of the Cyberdogs as simply a frustrating setback. He has seen the inevitable future. Eventually, there will be no Hamids, no lupus, no metis, no packs, no camps, no tribes, only Garou, with one mind and one will, defend Gaia in all of her metallic and cybernetic glory. And won't that be just perfect? Number 5. Teeth of Titanium. This lupus glasswalker was actually born into the Red Talons tribe of Australia by the name Bloody Teeth. But the Talons made the critical error of attacking members of the technocracy in Perth, Western Australia. The technocrats captured Bloody Teeth and decided to subject him to various experiments, as a live Garou was a rare prize for them. The technocrats implanted a living mechanical entity inside of the Red Talon's body. Over the next few months, the once proud Lupus Arun was transformed into a cybernetic monstrosity. The technocrats later released Bloody Teeth to see what would happen to him now. He returned to the Red Talons, but fled when they tried to slay him for stinking of the Weaver. He then returned to Perth, where he met Glasswalkers of the Cyberdogs camp, who were fascinated by his condition, which seemed as if someone had done their homework for them and then dropped it in their laps. The Lupus, now named Teeth of Titanium, became a faithful member of the tribe, and even rose to become Lord of Perth and a member of the Glasswalkers' board of directors in Australia. But the creature within him has stripped him of much of his emotion. As powerful as he is, he rarely frenzies, and in truth can no longer utilize his rage. Teeth of Titanium still regards himself as a protector of Gaia, but the machine continues to strip him of his emotions and nibbles at the edges of his mind. In time, it will consume him entirely. Fear of that day, when he becomes more machine than Garou, is the only emotion that Teeth of Titanium has left. Number 4. Elizabeth Genereader. Born in Holland in 1977, Elizabeth was her parents' second child. Her older brother had a tendency to hog their parents' attention, but he was intelligent, resourceful, and ambitious. Elizabeth was competitive herself, but she never liked to stand in the spotlight, to seek adulation, or even to receive it. Instead, she worked quietly, but always with a mind towards outdoing her brother in some different field of study. Where Elizabeth's brother was a computer wizard, she took up biology. When she was a university student, she underwent the first change and killed her boyfriend during an argument. The Glasswalkers arrived soon after and covered up the killing, then arranged to have her live on campus, away from her parents who were unaware of their Garou heritage. Elizabeth then quietly completed a degree in biology and became a genetics researcher, hence the name Genereader. Elizabeth was first introduced to the Cyberdogs when she befriended Daly Franz, a Glasswalker and early disciple of Gabriel van der Linden. She noticed a disturbing change in Franz's personality as he began quoting van der Linden's teachings verbatim when they discussed the Cyberdogs' camp. Her concern turned to fear when spirits in her sept whispered to her that the Cyberdogs intended to replace them. With what, they would not say. Elizabeth overcame her shyness and began speaking out against the Cyberdogs, first on GWNet, then at Moots. One day, she received a mysterious email, chiding her for not doing enough research. Several exchanges later, and a plane ride, then a hike through the woods, and Elizabeth Genereader found herself at the Sept of the Night Sky in Hungary, meeting with the Shadow Lord's Theurge, Margrave Yuri Konietzko. The Shadow Lord knew exactly what Gabriel van der Linden had done, and more importantly, what he planned to do. He offered Elizabeth several useful arguments to use against the Cyberdogs, as well as damning evidence against them, in exchange for favors to be named later. Elizabeth was wary of accepting the deal from the older and treacherous Shadow Lord, but van der Linden had truly fallen to the Weaver, and therefore was a threat to the entire tribe. During the Great Glasswalker Moot of 1999, known as Promethean Days, Elizabeth exposed the Cyberdogs' crimes of kidnapping, experimentation, and murder against Glasswalker Lupus Garou. The judgment against the Cyberdogs was swift and harsh. The Random Interrupts, a group of Glasswalker hackers and script kiddies who use computers to combat the Wyrm and bolster the Garou Nation, have subsequently tried to press Elizabeth into a role as their de facto leader, as well as in the Glasswalker Nation at large, despite her only being a Fostern. But for her part, Elizabeth wants to return to her previous role as a quiet researcher and supporting member of her pack. She dreads the idea of being anyone's leader, worries about what kind of favor Margrave Konietzko will ask her for, and is terrified that Gabriel van der Linden might seek her out for revenge. Number 3. Paul Matzenkopf. Paul was fanatical about science fiction as a child, and his fascination with the technological utopian future followed him through his first change and his rite of passage as a Garou. When Gabriel van der Linden was recruiting members for the Cyberdogs, Paul looked at his inventions, his discoveries, and his genius, and saw all of his childhood dreams being realized before his very eyes. Gabriel was the sort of leader who would take the tribe into its next evolution, or so he thought. When Elizabeth Genereader exposed the Cyberdogs during Promethean Days, Paul was devastated, but unbroken by the revelation. He had not been part of the experiments on the Lupus, and was not purged with the other Cyberdogs, but he did have the good sense to keep his head down and reach out only to those Garou he trusted, former Cyberdogs and sympathizers in other camps. This loose alliance, known to themselves as the Neo-Cyberdogs, are determined to make up for the mistakes of the past, and envisioned cybernetics and techno-fetishism as part of the solution to the War of the Apocalypse, rather than the one and only solution. Paul Matzenkopf's first project was the restoration of Teeth of Titanium, who had been experimented on by both technocrats and cyberdogs. Teeth of Titanium shared his fear that he was going insane with Paul, and Paul swore to save him from the madness of clarity. Paul works to slowly remove the implants infesting Teeth of Titanium's body, for the sake of his own redemption, and as proof that not all cyberdogs should be condemned for the sins of their ideological father. Number 2. Dr. Stephen Mindbender Garrison. Stephen Garrison, also known by his Garou name, Mindbender, has traveled throughout the Umbra, even journeying into Malpheus in the Deep Umbra, though that trip was kept as short as possible. Despite the Umbra being based mainly on the intellect and will of the creatures inhabiting it and its particular regions, Mindbender believes that he can form theories about the Umbra's true nature. To his thinking, the Umbra has some underlying structure to it, which he believes lie in the Weaver's pattern web. In turn, each zone in the Umbra is a piece of the pattern web. Areas of the Umbra which do not conform to this theory are clearly in decay. As proof of this, he points out that the wild zones are slowly diminishing in the Umbra as a result of the Wyrm's influence, but the Weaver zones are holding steady and in some cases expanding. The conclusion is that the wild, lacking organization or framework, is slowly being driven from existence, or the pattern web system. Given that most Garou would not be terribly receptive to his theories, Dr. Garrison labors to collect evidence to support them. He is aided in his work by a number of net spiders, and even a wild spirit called a Malian. He is eager to find more data, even if that data contradicts his current theories. Number 1. Peter Ward. Peter Ward makes for an unlikely hero, but in his short life he has saved not only the Garou Nation, but the dwindling number of Saurian shifters, the Mokole, who are the memory of Gaia, just as the Garou are the claws and fangs of Gaia. Peter Ward was a glasswalker of the Tattle Creek Sept near Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Peter had inadvertently become the carrier of a wasting disease that overpowered a Garou's natural regenerative abilities called the Snow Plague, and infected his fellow glasswalkers thanks to a cologne given to him called Fever by his girlfriend, Briony MacLeod, who was secretly a black spiral dancer. Peter took responsibility for his mistake and flew to Manaus in Brazil to locate and steal a cure from the Pentex laboratory located there. He joined the Severed Arm Pack led by the Silverfang Roshan One Arm. Peter also encountered the Ghost Raptor Pack, followers of the great totem Uktana, and one of the first to engage in the war in the Amazon. The Ghost Raptors told him that the answer to the cure might be found with the Mokole Membe, the ancient dragon shifters who had dwelt in the Amazon for nearly 500,000 years. Peter and his group found the Mokole, who had been hunted by the Garou since the War of Rage. The dragon shifters prepared to kill the intruders, but were spared at the last moment by the Mokole leader, Nii Feathered Thunder, the elder of the Amazons. She listened as Peter pled to her for his quest to save his people. The Mokole are the memory of Gaia, and as such, they remembered all of the savagery with which the Garou had fallen on them over the millennia. But Nii heard the truth, and the atonement in Peter's words. Perhaps this wolf was different from the others, so she gave him a test. Peter would share in the memories of another Mokole, Tree's Dream, the warder of the Mokole Wallow. If he survived, Peter would have his answer. If not, he would die. Peter agreed and shared in Ebene with Tree's Dream, a hallucinogen that Mokole used to enter the Nesis, the shared dream memory of the Mokole race. Peter Ward not only survived, but was blessed by Helios with the ability to delve into the Nesis himself, the only Garou to ever possess that ability. Peter emerged from the Nesis with the knowledge that the plant Pentex had used to create the Snow Plague could also be used to create an antidote. However, Peter and the Severed Arm Pack were captured by the Black Spiral Dancers and taken to a Pentex facility in Manaus. There, they overheard the Dancers' plan to lure Gogol Fangsfirst into a trap and destroy him. But Peter tricked the Dancers into believing that he was turning to the Wyrm, escaped from captivity, and freed his allies. Together, they found samples of the flour they needed before destroying Pentex's stockpiles along with finished bottles of fever. They used the flowers to create a synthesized cure that Peter took back to Tattle Creek Sept and saved his friends and kin from death. This would usually be as much heroism as could be asked of any Garou, but Peter Ward still had to grapple with the nisus of the Mokole. The dreams dragged him to Australia in 1999, home of the Gumagan Mokole, travelers of the Umbra and questers through dreams. Once there, he met two Aborigine Gumagan, Jeffo and Mwangu, who guided him in how to use the nisus without being swallowed up by it and trapped in the past, or attacked by the monsters that swim in the rivers and seas of the Mokole's memories. Peter Ward learned that much of what the Garou believed about the Mokole had been untrue, that the War of Rage was unjustified, and that in the coming apocalypse, the Garou would need the Mokole as much as the Mokole needed the Garou. But another Garou learned about what Peter was doing. The bloodthirsty Mamu, alpha of the Red Talons of Pilbara Protectorate, a predator king, and as savage a dingo as one could find. Mamu, slayer of dingoes, Garou, and humans alike, set out to finish what his ancestor tried to before, and destroy the Gumagan Mokole. When the Red Talons descended on Peter, Jeffo, and Mwangu, Peter surrendered to them. Several Red Talons agreed that he had surrendered honorably, which must be accepted according to the litany. But Mamu roared at them to kill them, and lunged for Peter. Then, something blocked Mamu's way, a massive gray wolf. But not just any wolf. This was the progenitor wolf, the first of their kind. He had been summoned from the ancestral memories of the Garou present by Peter and the Mokole. The great wolf commanded them that the wars of rage come to an end, and that the Red Talons never again make war upon the Mokole. Mamu urged his followers to kill the Mokole once again, but was silenced by the progenitor wolf, who said that the Arun was no true wolf, only a dog. When the ancestor faded back into memory, Mamu tried to reassert his authority, but none of the Red Talons would ever follow him again. In shame and fury, Mamu fled into the outback and was not seen again. Then, a glasswalker, some Red Talons, and Gumagan Mokole sat down around the fire to talk, for the first time in living memory. And those were the top 10 werewolves of the Glasswalkers. The Glasswalkers are one of the tribes that cut against the Garou grain of primitivism and open contempt for humanity. The Glasswalkers, rather, respect humanity, but still continue in their ancient tradition as warders of men, both from the predations of the Wyrm and from humanity's own folly. But the next tribe hates humanity as much, if not more so, than they do the Wyrm. They thought the Impergium was so nice that they want to do it twice. Everyone's favorite bunch of genocidal wolf supremacists. Coming up, the top 10 werewolves of the Red Talons. Until next time.